There is a kind of falling that nobody warns you about. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind in movies, with the music swelling and the single tear catching the light. I am talking about the kind of falling that happens quietly, one ordinary Tuesday, in a hospital waiting room under fluorescent lights that hum just slightly too loud. That is where Sarah was the night her life fell apart for the third time. Before we continue, tell me where you are watching from, and what time it is right now where you are. Drop it in the comments, and if you have ever been knocked down more than once by life, not once, but again and again, stay with me. This one is for you. Please like and subscribe. Sarah was 31 years old. And by the time she reached that waiting room, she had already learned something most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Life does not ask permission before it knocks you down. And it rarely only knocks you down once. 5 years earlier, Sarah had everything lined up the way she had been taught to line things up. Good grades, a respected degree in architecture, a job offer from a well-regarded firm before she had even graduated. Parents who were proud in the way that makes a young person feel like the future is already a promise that has been signed and sealed. The first fall came 8 months into that job. The firm lost its biggest client. Then its second biggest. Within a year, half the staff was let go, and Sarah, despite being good at her work, was junior enough to be among the first cuts. She remembered standing outside the building with a small cardboard box of her things, watching her own reflection in the glass doors she would no longer be allowed to walk through, thinking, "This was not supposed to happen to me. I did everything right." That is the thought that breaks people. I did everything right, and it still happened. It took Sarah 4 months to find another position, and when she did, it was at a smaller firm, for less pay, doing less interesting work. She told herself it was temporary, a stepping stone. She told herself this was simply what building a career looked like. For 2 years, that smaller firm became home. Sarah worked hard. She built relationships. She started slowly to believe again that stability was something she could count on. Then the second fall came. It was not a layoff this time. It was her mother's diagnosis. Stage 2, the doctors said at first, which sounded almost manageable until it became stage 3 within 6 months. Sarah took leave from work to care for her, drove 2 hours each way on weekends, sat in waiting rooms exactly like the one she would find herself in years later, and learned a different kind of falling. The kind where you are not the one who is sick, but you fall anyway, into exhaustion, into fear, into the particular grief of watching someone you love disappear slowly, while still being asked to function in a world that has not slowed down to match your pace. Her mother passed 18 months after the diagnosis. Sarah went back to work 3 weeks later because the bills did not stop coming, and grief does not pay rent. People who have not lived through repeated falls have a particular kind of advice for those who have. Stay strong. Everything happens for a reason. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Sarah heard all of it. And some nights, she believed none of it, because here is what nobody tells you about falling more than once. The first fall, you fight. You have reserves. You have the natural human optimism that assumes this is a single bad chapter in an otherwise good book. The second fall is different. The second fall starts to ask a more dangerous question. Not why did this happen, but why does this keep happening to me? And that question, if you let it sit too long, starts to calcify into something that feels like identity. I am someone things happen to. I am someone who falls. Sarah was dangerously close to that calcification when the third fall arrived. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Her younger brother, James, had been in a car accident on his way home from a night shift. Not his fault. The other driver had run a red light. He was alive. That was the first thing the hospital told her, and she clung to it the way you cling to a single fact in a sentence that is about to fall apart. He was alive. But he was in surgery, and he would be in surgery for the next 6 hours, and nobody could tell her anything more than that until it was over. So she sat in that waiting room, under fluorescent lights that hummed too loud, alone, because their parents were both gone now and James was, in many real ways, the only family she had left walking this earth. And somewhere around hour 4, something in Sarah simply stopped, not dramatically. She did not cry out or break down in a way anyone watching would have noticed. She just stopped. Stopped hoping in the active way she had hoped through the first fall and the second fall. Something quieter and more dangerous took its place. I cannot do this again. I do not have it in me to fall a third time. An older woman sat down 2 chairs away from her. Sarah had not noticed her arrive. She wore a simple cardigan, had gray hair pulled into a low bun, and was knitting something small and blue, her needles clicking softly in the otherwise silent room. Sarah did not want to talk to anyone. She made that clear with her posture, with her eyes fixed on the middle distance. But the woman spoke anyway, quietly, not looking up from her knitting. My husband has been in there 11 hours, the woman said. Heart surgery. Third one in 6 years. Sarah turned, despite herself. Third one, Sarah repeated. Third one, the woman said, still knitting. First time, I thought I would die from the fear of it. Second time, I thought I would die from the unfairness of it. Why does this keep happening to a good man who has never hurt anyone? Third time, she paused. Looked up from her knitting for the first time. Looked directly at Sarah with eyes that were tired but not broken. Third time, I just held his hand and told him I would be here when he woke up. Because that is what I know how to do now. I do not know how to stop bad things from happening. I only know how to keep being here. Sarah did not say anything for a long moment. The woman's needles clicked softly. Somewhere down the hallway, a door opened and closed. How do you do that? Sarah finally asked. How do you keep being here, every time, without it breaking you completely? The woman set her knitting down in her lap. She thought about the question seriously. The way you think about a question, someone has actually earned the right to ask. I used to think strength meant not falling, she said. I do not think that anymore. I have fallen 3 times in 6 years with this man's heart alone. Not counting everything else life has thrown at us in 40 years of marriage. I am not strong because I have avoided falling. She picked her knitting back up. Her needles resumed their soft rhythm. I am strong because I have learned exactly what to do in the seconds right after I land. That is all rising strong actually is. It is not about the falling. The falling happens to everyone. It is about what you have practiced doing in the moment right after. Sarah felt something in her chest, the same crack of light feeling she had felt once before, years ago, though she could not place when. A door opening that she had not known was closed. What do you do? Sarah asked. In those seconds right after, the woman counted them off on her fingers, still knitting between each one, as though the rising itself was as practiced as the stitches. First, I let myself feel it, all of it. I do not perform strength in those first hours. I cried for 2 days straight after the first surgery. That is not weakness. That is the body doing what it is supposed to do with pain. Trying to skip that step is like trying to build a house on ground you never let settle. Second, after the feeling has moved through me, not before, after, I ask one small question. Not what do I do with my whole life now? That question is too big, and it will frighten you back into the floor. I ask, what is the next right thing today? Just today. Third, the woman said, and here her voice softened. I remember every single time before this when I thought I could not survive something, and I did. Not because I was special, because survival is not a talent. It is just what happens when you keep breathing long enough for the next morning to arrive. And fourth, she said, looking up again, I let someone sit with me while I am falling, even when everything in me wants to do it alone. You sitting here, letting me talk to you tonight, that is already you doing the fourth thing, whether you meant to or not. The doctor who eventually came for the older woman brought good news. Her husband had come through. Sarah watched her gather her knitting with hands that shook slightly with relief. Watched her thank Sarah with a warm, tired smile. Watched her disappear down the hallway toward the man she had been rising for. 3 times now, for 40 years, Sarah was alone again in the waiting room. But something had shifted. She thought about the woman's 4 things. She thought about her own 3 falls, the job, her mother, and now this, still suspended, still unknown. She thought about how she had handled the first 2 falls, with gritted teeth, with a refusal to feel anything fully, with the exhausting performance of being fine that had left her by the 3rd fall, with nothing left in reserve. She had been doing it wrong, not because she was weak, but because nobody had ever taught her what rising actually required. She had thought rising meant getting back up exactly as you were before, as quickly as possible, with as little visible damage as possible. She had thought every fall that left a mark was a fall she had failed to survive correctly. But the older woman had cried for 2 days after her husband's first surgery and was sitting here, decades later, still rising. The crying had not been the opposite of strength. It had been the foundation of it, When the surgeon finally came for Sarah, 6 hours after she had arrived, James had come through. Stable recovery would be long, but he would walk again, the surgeon said. With time and the right care, Sarah did not collapse with relief the way she might have once. She let the relief move through her fully. Let herself cry right there in the hallway, openly, without performing composure for the nurses walking past. Step 1. She asked the surgeon one question, the only one that mattered in that moment. What is the next right thing, today, for him? Not the whole road ahead, just today. Step 2. She sat beside James's bed that night and thought about her mother, about the job she had lost 5 years ago that had felt, at the time, like the end of everything, and she let herself remember that she had survived both of those, fully, completely, even when she could not have imagined it in the moment. Step 3. And when her phone buzzed with a message from a coworker asking how she was holding up, she did something she would not have done a week earlier. She told the truth. Not great. Could use company this weekend if you have time. Step 4. The months that followed were not easy. James's recovery had setbacks. There were nights Sarah was afraid again, nights the old instinct to grit her teeth and perform fine rose up automatically. But each time, she returned to the 4 things. Feel it fully. Ask only what is next, today. Remember every time before that you survived. Let someone sit with you. She started seeing a therapist, something she had resisted after her mother's death. Telling herself she did not have time, telling herself she could handle it alone the way she always had. She realized now that handling it alone had not actually been strength. It had been a kind of slow erosion she had mistaken for resilience. She reconnected with the coworker who had texted that night, and then with 2 old friends she had let drift away during the years of just surviving. She discovered, slowly, that the 4th thing, letting people sit with her in the falling, did not make her weaker. It made the rising sustainable in a way solitary, gritted teeth rising never had been. A year later, Sarah was sitting in a different waiting room. Not a hospital this time. A small studio space she was renting, waiting for the painter she had hired to finish the lettering on the door. She had left the architecture firm. Not in a fall this time, but in a choice. She had started designing small accessible housing renovations for elderly people living alone. Work she had begun almost by accident, after helping the older woman from the waiting room with a home modification project for her recovering husband. They had stayed in touch. Her name was Eleanor, and the day after James left the hospital, Sarah had gone to find her in the cardiac ward to thank her properly, and the 2 of them had talked for 2 hours. The lettering on the studio door, when the painter finished it, was simple. Just Sarah's name, and beneath it, 3 words she had chosen carefully. Rising Strong Studio. My friend, I want to speak to you plainly for a moment. If you have fallen once, you already know something true. The world does not promise you it will only happen once. If you have fallen more than once, you know something even truer and harder. Each fall asks more of you than the last one did, because each fall arrives on top of the tiredness the last one left behind. I am not going to tell you that everything happens for a reason. I do not know if that is true, and I think people who say it too quickly have usually not fallen hard enough to know how hollow it can sound from the bottom. What I will tell you is what Eleanor told Sarah in that waiting room, because it is the only piece of wisdom in this entire story that actually held up under the weight of being tested 3 times, 6 times, a lifetime of times. Rising strong is not about not falling. Everyone falls. Rising strong is about what you have practiced doing in the seconds right after you land. So here are the 4 things, and I want you to actually remember them, because one day, maybe soon, maybe not for years, you are going to need them. Feel it fully before you try to fix it. Grief and fear that get skipped do not disappear. They wait, and they get heavier while they wait. Ask only what is next, today. Not your whole future. Not the whole road. Just the next right thing, in front of you, right now. Remember every time before that you survived. You have already done the hardest thing a human being can do, which is continue. More times than you probably give yourself credit for. Let someone sit with you while you are falling. Not despite your strength. As part of it. The people who rise strongest are very rarely the people who rose alone. If you are in your own waiting room tonight, literal or otherwise, I want you to know that the falling is not evidence that something is wrong with you. The falling is simply what happens to everyone who is brave enough to keep building a life instead of protecting themselves from ever losing anything. What matters now, what has always mattered, is not whether you fall again. It is what you do in the seconds right after you land. If this story reached something in you, like this video as your reminder that you have risen before and you will rise again. Share it with someone who is in their own waiting room right now, who needs to hear that the falling does not define them. Tell me in the comments, how many times have you had to rise? I want to hear it. Every number is a story of survival, and every survival deserves to be spoken out loud. I will be back with another story soon. Until then, remember this: you have already survived everything that has tried to keep you down. That is not luck. That is who you are.